Thank you all for coming. My talk, thank you, for better or worse is going to be a lot different than the other talks you've heard today. And the reason is because I didn't know all you lovely people were going to be here. I thought I was providing a research update to my colleagues. So instead of talking a little about a lot of plants, I'm going to talk a lot about one plant, basically, or one genus, which is Osmanthus. And I think a lot of and I will warn you, there are 2 bar graphs in this presentation, but you can just avert your eyes if you don't want to see data, and we'll just go right through them. I think I got a really great setup by Matthew Chappell, who said that Osmanthus fragrans was his favorite plant. That was a great lead-in. And also mentioning about Cheonanthus and emerald ash borer. And I'll bring that up again soon. So my goal is to provide nursery growers and gardeners with recommendations for Osmanthus that you can grow. So all of these previous presentations have been all these plants that aren't hardy here. Mine is the opposite. I'm only interested in the plants that are going to be hardy here. My position is I work for the National Arboretum, but we're located in McMinnville, Tennessee, because the senators and representatives from Tennessee lobbied Congress to place 2 people to support the nursery industry in McMinnville, Tennessee, because that's kind of the center of the nursery industry there in Tennessee. So our jobs are very applied. They are to serve the nursery industry. So a lot of the breeding I do, we think of gardeners and the people shopping at Lowe's and Home Depot as the end consumer, but my customer is actually the nursery grower. So a lot of the breeding I do is to make their lives easier. So I might release a hydrangea that to you doesn't look much different. Hopefully it'll be a little better than what's out there, but to a grower it might have some disease resistance or some less water use requirements, things that really help the growers. And those in turn always help gardeners and stuff too. So why Osmanthus? Osmanthus is an Oleaceae, which is the olive family. It consists of about 30 species with a center of distribution in the temperate and tropical portions of China. We do have one native species, Osmanthus americanus, called devilwood or wild olive. The most popular cultivar is, what did I do? Okay. Osmanthus fragrans, which is known as sweet osmanthus, fragrant tea olive, sweet olive, depending on where you're from. There are 168 cultivars in the new 2008 monograph, probably more since then. And in China, and in a lot of zone 7, 8, and 9 here in the States, it's used as a commodity landscape plant. So the first time I ever saw it used as such, I pulled into an Aldi in New Orleans, opened my car door, and the parking lot smelled amazing. And when does the Aldi parking lot smell amazing? Never in Tennessee. And it was in the verge, in the little parking lot dividers, they had Osmanthus fragrans planted there. And it's very fragrant. It smelled amazing. And I just thought, wow, if only we could have something like that as well. Also, the nursery growers have requested it. So I have nursery growers that they want some more options for an evergreen. They want more options for fragrance. And they have Asian American customers that are asking them for these iconic plants from their home countries. So there is a demand for it. And right here, there's a picture. This is Osmanthus fragrans. It can be pruned into a tree form, or it can be a shrub or a verge. There's a lot of options on the form. It can have white flowers all the way to dark orange flowers, and pretty much the whole spectrum in between. The plants that are often called red flowering are really this dark orange color. There are 5 species that you can buy in the nursery trade. When I say common, I don't mean Lowe's and Home Depot common. I mean, you got to Google it, but they're there. And that's Osmanthus fragrans, Osmanthus heterophilus, Osmanthus fortunyi, which is a fragrance heterophilous hybrid, Osmanthus burkewoodii, which is another hybrid, and Osmanthus armatus. So here is some Osmanthus fragrans. You can see that you can have a tree form or a very nice hedge. Can you imagine having the whole side of your house in a completely fragrant evergreen shrub? And they bloom, where I'm from in Tennessee, they bloom from November to March, so they're winter blooming. And again, they have the white, light yellow, dark yellow, all the way to orange flowers. O. heterophilus has many forms in the trade. One of the most popular is rotunda folius, which is a round leaf. There are many, many examples in botanical gardens throughout the South, a beautiful plant. Goshiki is a holly form, and it has, you can kind of see in this picture, the new growth, the leaves are slightly variegated and the new growth is sort of a pink color. And at the end, I'll show you the pictures of the plants that I grow in the pots, and they're a little more close up and you can kind of see these fine textures a little better. This is the Fortune's tea olive, the hybrid between Osmanthus fragrans and Osmanthus heterophilus. And again, you can see how you can use it as a tree, or you can use it more as a wall or its own freestanding shrub. There's examples of all of those uses. And it generally has white flowers and also very fragrant. So what I wanted to do is say, okay, there's all these cultivars, there's all these plants, and they say, and again, back to what Matthew was saying earlier, they say you just can't grow Osmanthus farther north than Zone 7, but I haven't found any, scientific replicated trial that has proven that. So I just decided to get as many cultivars as I could buy in, decent sized plants and test that. So I'm sorry that I only have 1 year of data to report. Generally, you like to have 3 years before you stand in front of a group of people and make claims. But so we'll consider this preliminary. But these are the cultivars that I used in the trial. You can see that I tried to get a variety of armatus, fortunyi, fragrans, and heterophilus. The original sizes were different, and I upped them as soon as I bought them, which was May of last year. Under the cultivar column, when it says SPP period, that means that's not a named cultivar. That is like what's considered the pure species, which of course, if you have a hybrid, to call something the pure species is weird, but suffice to say it's an unnamed, it's not sold as a cultivar. So this is the bar chart. You can totally ignore if you want, but basically it's not hard. Percent growth is on the y-axis. 300% growth means it tripled its size. Negative growth means that it is smaller at the end of the season than it was at the beginning, and you're wondering how is that possible? The reason it's possible is because if you have tip dieback, you only measure to the furthest living node. So that means that there was some dieback of tips during the growing season. And here's something to notice about this. So I didn't put species underneath because it kind of cluttered up the graph, but there's no pattern of species in that graph. So one thing that was clear in the very beginning is that I cannot recommend heterophilus will grow here, but armatus will not. It was very cultivar by cultivar, right? So in my scientific terms, I will say species was not a significant influence on this growth rate. It was all about the specific cultivar. So what do I got here? Okay, so this graph is showing two more things. I added the light blue. So the dark blue was how much it grew during last year's growing season, May to November. Well, I also measured this May, and so that tells me how much it grew between when it broke bud in, say, February and March till now. So you can see with the blue, obviously it's less. It's only had, a couple of months to put on some new growth this year, so it's less than last year. But I also was able to measure stem dieback, and that stem dieback is just due to cold. which is the major limitation for the Osmanthus, any Osmanthus here, is cold. So the cultivars with percentages on top, that's the percent of the branch tips that were dead when I went in May to measure. And you can see that immediately from this data, I can see that these two had like almost no growth last year. More than a quarter of their stems died back. So I already can say they're not going to be the winners for this group of plants. And here's what that looks like. So on the left, you have O. heterophilus ogon, and ogon is the word for gold. So generally, if you see a cultivar called ogon, it's going to be a gold color. And you can see the dieback on that. Same thing, this is Osmanthus fragrans, this is Benikin mokusi, and some pretty major dieback. So you can see what I mean by the plant being shorter, in the second year than the first. That's how you end up with negative growth. I will say that when I got these plants, I split them out. I planted half outside, I left half in containers that I was able to bring in for the winter. So what I'm comparing when I say I'm actually comparing these to my protected plants as far as how well they grow. My protected plants are the standard, the outdoor plants I'm comparing them to. If they went inside for the winter into a covered poly house, none of this happened. They're beautiful. But I want things that people can plant in their yard and that doesn't have to be protected. So my final rank, and this is by winter location. Don't worry, it's just the growth index. This is a typical growth index where I've subtracted stem death. And outdoor was pot and pot, inside was the poly house. You can see how the final rank, they ranked out. And if you look, the top 3 outdoors were also the top 3 in the poly house. A couple of fragrans that were growing in the poly house snuck in because they love the summers. They grow great. I mean, one of them had 300% growth. It grew from waist high to over my head in one season, but they can't take the winters outside. So it's a little bit misleading. If you pool all your data, the fragrans seem like they're the winners, but if I separate it out where they spent the winter, the ones in the pot and pot spent the winter outside. There were no fragrans that made that cut. So here are some of my favorites. Here are the ones that did really well. This is Osmanthus fortunyi San Jose. I think it's just got this great upright habit, great new growth. The new growth is like a reddish color. It's just got these really pretty smooth leaves. Another one is Fruitlandy, named for the famous old nursery in South Carolina. And again, just this nice upright habit. It grew very well, put on lots of healthy new growth after spending one winter outside. Definitely one to keep our eye on. I joke that we're using clover as a cover crop. In reality, we've been shorthanded. We've just hired somebody. So next year, you'll have to come back so you can see my beautiful weed-free strips. That's what I'm going to promote next time. And again, this is just a close-up of the Fruitlandy. Beautiful different colors of the foliage. The new is light, the old is darker. I thought it was a very pretty plant for us. Chien is another one that did very well for us. It's smaller, slower growing. It probably isn't going to grow into a tree form in anybody's lifetime. But it also was very healthy after being out all winter, put on great new growth, and it's got all sorts of interesting pink and white and green variegation in it. Another one that did well for us is Goshiki, and I showed this earlier as a giant shrub, but here you can see it's smaller, how it is variegated, and then the new growth is yellow and pink. And again, the ones from the poly house were amazingly colored, but I refuse to show those, we're only showing the ones that were grown outside and survived the winter that you too can potentially take home to your garden. Oh, I'm sorry, this isn't Goshiki, this is rotundifolius. I apologize, just to get it in your head, this is Goshiki. This is rotundifolius. You can see the round leaf form, so it's a little more friendly maybe than the spiny or holly type leaf. It put on more volume growth than height growth, and but still grew very well. And this little guy, Kaori Hime, was actually our best grower. It's pretty small. It's only about as high as my knee, but it started off this tall. So going from this tall to knee high was actually pretty good. Hime means small, so there's these tiny, they're little small leaves. It's a very cool, interesting plant, but again, a smaller, for a smaller spot in the landscape. Okay, and so what are we going to do eventually with those? So I have lots more species in propagation. You just can't buy a lot of them, so I went to botanical gardens and took cuttings, and that's another whole issue. There's some propagation studies going on as well. We're adding more cultivars, hopefully more recommendations of cultivars that are you can already buy, as well as breeding. So one thing that Wynn and Matthew have both mentioned is that Cheonanthus, it's this wonderful tree, fringe tree, and it might have been a replacement for dogwood, but oh no, emerald ash borer. Well, it turns out through some DNA analysis, we've discovered that Osmanthus and Cheonanthus are extremely closely related. And Osmanthus does not get emerald ash borer. So one of the hopes that I have is to find some hardy material and then cross it onto Cheonanthus and try to recover that tolerance to emerald ash borer, but still have an acceptable fringe tree-y product. And also just to improve Osmanthus, just to steadily march it further north into cold hardiness zones, and just introduce this great plant to more people. So if you have any questions about Osmanthus or anything like that, please let me know. I also do a lot of hydrangea stuff. You might have rather seen my hydrangea talk because there's prettier pictures, but this is new. It's going on right now, and so you saw it here first, and thank you for coming.